During the tense height of the Cold War, one American soldier made a decision that stunned the world. James Joseph Dresnok, stationed at the Demilitarized Zone between North and South Korea, simply walked across the border into the North. In an instant, he transformed from a soldier into a defector, an act viewed as betrayal by his country and a mystery to the world. For decades, both nations kept quiet, the U.S. out of embarrassment and North Korea to maintain its illusion. When his story finally surfaced, it raised haunting questions about loyalty, loneliness, and the meaning of freedom. James Joseph Dresnok was born on November 24, 1941, in Richmond, Virginia. His early life was marked by poverty, instability, and heartbreak. His parents fought constantly, and when his mother finally fled from his abusive father, young James was swept into a life of uncertainty. They drove from town to town, sleeping in their car and surviving on scraps. His mother turned to drinking and prostitution, leaving James and his brother alone in the back seat at night. Their lives unraveled until relatives intervened, splitting the brothers apart. James sent to an aunt who resented him, and his brother to an uncle. Feeling unwanted, James ran away repeatedly. His aunt, tired of his rebellion, returned him to his father, only to be abandoned again. His father, now remarried, pretended James didn't exist. One day, he drove James to a nursing home under the pretense of visiting a relative, left him in the lobby, and never returned. Betrayed and alone, James wandered off, stealing a bicycle and a $20 bill before being caught by police. Labeled a delinquent, he narrowly avoided a detention center and was sent instead to the Overstreet Children's Home, a place that would finally give him stability and kindness. At the Overstreet home, James found something he'd never experienced before: belonging. Pastor C.T. Overstreet, affectionately called Big Papa, treated the orphans like family. For the first time, James felt safe. His friend Sonny Jeter remembered him as a boy who had absolutely nothing to call his own but the clothes on his back. Despite the warmth of the home, the odds were stacked against him. With little education and no real guidance, he faced adulthood with limited prospects. Like many lost boys seeking direction, James saw the military as a path to survival, discipline, and perhaps redemption. At 17, James enlisted in the U.S. Army. It seemed like his best shot at a career and a way out of poverty. He hoped to see the world, gain respect, and finally build a life of his own. But Army life proved to be another kind of cage. The rules were suffocating, the discipline relentless. Officers barked orders. Individuality was crushed. What he longed for was simple: love, stability, and a family. During a brief leave, he met and married a young woman named Kathleen Ringwood. Yet while stationed overseas in Germany, he received a letter that shattered him. She wanted a divorce. Her betrayal broke him completely. He had stayed faithful for years, believing in the dream of a happy American life, a house, a wife, a future. But the letter was proof that the American dream had no place for him. Disillusioned and numb, he re-enlisted in the Army, saying, "The time I left Richmond, I was fed up. I didn't want nothing. If I died or lived, I didn't care." That sense of hopelessness would follow him to his next posting, one that would change his fate forever: the heavily armed border dividing two bitter enemies, North and South Korea. By 1962, the Korean War had officially ended, but the hostility had not. James was stationed at the Demilitarized Zone, a deadly stretch of land bristling with mines, barbed wire, and soldiers on edge. Life there was bleak and monotonous. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol and brief encounters in South Korean villages, living from one payday to the next. His frustration with authority deepened when he forged a pass to visit a girlfriend, only to be caught. Facing a court-martial, penniless, and with no future ahead, James decided that his next step would not be back, but forward, into the unknown. On August 15, 1962, during lunch, he made his fateful move. In broad daylight, Dresnok walked away from his base toward the North Korean border. His comrades shouted for him to return, but he ignored them. He fired his rifle into the air, one final act of defiance. Ahead lay the minefields of the DMZ, but he didn't care if he lived or died. As North Korean soldiers approached, weapons drawn, he raised his hands. They blindfolded him and took him away for interrogation. That day, James Joseph Dresnok vanished from the West and re-emerged as a ghost in the East. To the North Koreans, Dresnok was both a prize and a mystery. Interrogators questioned him relentlessly, but as a low-ranking private, he knew no valuable secrets. Surprisingly, he cooperated. The next morning, a voice woke him. "Dresnok, I'm Abshir." Confused, he met another American defector, Larry Allen Abshir. Soon more defectors joined them, Jerry Wayne Parrish in 1963 and Sergeant Charles Robert Jenkins in 1965. Each had their own story of disillusionment, yet all shared the same fate. North Korea saw in them a propaganda opportunity to prove that even Americans would choose communism over capitalism. The four men became reluctant symbols of North Korean ideology. Dresnok, fluent in English and eager to please, began speaking on radio broadcasts urging American soldiers to defect. He talked about racial inequality, poverty, and homelessness in the U.S., echoing the narratives North Korea wanted to amplify. Life, however, was far from paradise. Locals viewed the Americans with suspicion. They were forbidden to marry, constantly watched, and isolated from society. Feeling trapped, they decided to escape. In 1966, they approached the Soviet embassy for asylum, believing fellow white men would help them. Instead, they were rejected and returned to custody. To their surprise, there was no punishment. Instead, North Korean officials expressed guilt for making them feel unwelcome. They doubled down on teaching them language, culture, and ideology. Compared to the harsh discipline of the U.S. Army, the defectors found the North Koreans oddly forgiving. Over time, the men began to adapt. They were given homes, minders, and generous privileges. They read novels, smoked, swam, and reminisced about America. For Dresnok, this felt like the freedom he had never known. A life without judgment or loneliness. For Jenkins, however, it felt like a prison gilded in illusion. By the early 1970s, the men were fluent in Korean and granted citizenship. Kim Jong-il, then an aspiring filmmaker, saw potential in them. Fascinated by Hollywood, he cast the four Americans as villains in his state-produced films. Dresnok starred as Arthur in the epic 20-part drama Unsung Heroes, portraying a cruel Western enemy. Ironically, his performance made him beloved. Ordinary citizens began calling him by his character's name, offering him gifts and admiration. The man who had once been abandoned and forgotten in America was now a celebrated face in Pyongyang. A strange kind of redemption. Fame brought new privileges. Dresnok taught English at Pyongyang University, helping translate Western texts. One night in a restaurant, he met a European woman, Doina Bumbea, a Romanian artist. They fell in love, married, and had 2 sons. Years later, reports emerged that Doina had been kidnapped and placed with him intentionally. Her family never heard from her again. Dresnok denied the rumors, insisting she stayed willingly. Meanwhile, his fellow defector Larry Abshir married a Thai woman who had also vanished mysteriously. These women's disappearances revealed the darker truth of North Korea's foreign abduction program. As the years passed, tragedy followed. Abshir died of a heart attack in 1983. Parrish married a Lebanese woman, Sihanouk Shrieta, and lived quietly until his death in 1998. Dresnok endured North Korea's devastating famine of the 1990s largely unscathed, protected by his privileged status as a propaganda figure. His sons grew up as North Korean citizens, attending elite schools and later following his path into film. When interviewed, Dresnok expressed no regrets. "I have everything I need," he said calmly. "If I had stayed in America, I'd have nothing. I'm happy here." For him, defection had become destiny. Only Charles Jenkins continued to dream of escape. In 1980, he met Hitomi Soga, a young Japanese woman who confessed she had been kidnapped. The two married and shared their longing for freedom. Decades later, when Japan negotiated for the release of abducted citizens, Soga was allowed to return home temporarily and never came back. In 2004, Jenkins and their daughters were finally permitted to leave North Korea and reunite with her. For the first time in 40 years, Jenkins saw the free world again. His story reignited global interest in the mysterious fate of James Dresnok. From Japan, Jenkins published To Tell the Truth, a memoir detailing his years in captivity. He accused North Korea of brutality, and claimed that Dresnok had become their enforcer, beating him at least 30 times and assisting in forced tattoo removals. Dresnok dismissed the allegations, saying Jenkins exaggerated for fame. In a rare BBC interview, Dresnok revealed his scars from the tattoo removals, saying they had all volunteered. Two men, once brothers in exile, now stood as opposites, one condemning the regime, the other defending it as the only home he'd ever known. In his final years, Dresnok lived quietly in Pyongyang with his third wife, a mixed-race woman ostracized by Korean society. Together they had a son. His older sons, Theodore and James, became actors like him, portraying Americans in North Korean films. They proudly called themselves true sons of the DPRK. When asked about Red,